We call the meeting to order. We don't have an announcement anymore, so we're ready to get started.
All right. I guess I'll start with item A and call this meeting to order. I think Jessica will take it from here.
Yeah. I'm going to call it for presence today, and I have in alphabetical order by last name: Dorsey.
Here.
Eldridge.
Here.
Larson.
Here.
Littlejohn.
Here.
Smith.
I'm here. Sorry, my computer is having issues with working.
And Thomas.
Here.
Okay, we have a quorum.
All right. That being said, thank you all for being here today, and I'll go ahead and move us on to item B, public comment. Do we have anybody there for public comment or online?
You don't have anyone in the room for public comment, and no one has joined us online or raised their hand indicating they would like to provide public comment.
Okay. All right, I'll move us on to item C, approve the minutes. And if everybody hasn't had an opportunity, I'll give people a couple minutes to go ahead and do so. All right, I lied. As if anybody has any opposition, I would entertain a motion on the minutes there.
I'd move to approve. Allison Smith, KDOT.
Okay, have Allison Smith with a motion, and do we have a second?
Dean Dorsey will second.
Okay.
Jane Eldridge will abstain because I was not at the meeting.
Okay, sounds good. And then I think it's the roll call vote, right, Jessica?
Yep. Dorsey.
Yes.
And an abstention from Eldridge. Larson.
Yes.
Littlejohn.
Yes.
Smith.
Yes.
Thomas.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right. Thank you all. I'll go ahead and move us on to item D, agenda items. First one out of the chute is Vision Zero Transportation Safety Action Plan.
Cece's going to share a presentation for me, but I'll go ahead and get started. We were awarded a Safe Streets and Roads for All grant from Federal Highway Administration to work in partnership with the City of Lawrence, the City of Eudora, and Baldwin City to embark on a public planning process to establish a Vision Zero Transportation Safety Action Plan. And we are at the end of the road as far as the plan goes, but the beginning for embarking on efforts to reduce fatalities and serious injuries, or continued commitment in this space. And so we are working through what is called the Safe Systems approach. And this is a newer approach that varies from a traditional approach around safety, where the traditional approach focuses on crashes where the road user is responsible. Safe Systems is where agencies and organizations are, and as policymakers, planners, and engineers who build the systems, are a more proactive approach to creating a safe roadway network and system. And so it's really founded on these 5 principles of safe roads, where streets are designed to prevent crashes and severity; safe speeds, so ensuring that travel speeds are appropriate to the context and the user mix; safe vehicles, leveraging, at the national level, technology and standards to protect road users; safe road users, so talking about behavior through education and outreach of how people choose to operate in those spaces; and then post-crash care for improving, saving lives through response systems. So the Safety Action Plan is a plan that establishes a vision. It has strong data analysis. We're going to just highlight some of the findings that from the plan, although if you looked in the document, there's much, much more analysis in the actual document. But out of that comes strategies and an implementation plan and a commitment to monitor ongoing progress of crashes and the implementation of the plan. We would not have done this alone without the public. We had a public process. This body, the MPO Policy Board, established a steering committee of stakeholders to help us guide the development of this plan and process with the engagement of the community. We did a public survey process and hours and close to 100 hours of different staff efforts in terms of tabling and pop-ups. Admittedly, this was a more challenging plan to get people to engage with. And when you talked about Vision Zero safety, a lot of people were saying, oh, I don't bike, or I don't walk, or I don't. And admittedly, this is for all users. And in fact, you know, a lot of the crashes are people who are driving with other automobile drivers. But in all these spaces, we found still the majority of respondents ride in a car. And the safety is of importance, but distracted driving is a top concern. And most respondents were interested in design or engineering solutions that support safety. So we see that there's still predominance in this. We felt reflected a lot of, particularly for the car alone in terms of the response rates. A lot of people are driving in that space with the car alone, even though some people acknowledge using other modes. And so those are kind of reflected in that space also. We talked about solutions with people in general concepts around, and people were supportive of infrastructure solutions such as roundabouts, curb bump outs, and pedestrian islands. That's kind of the solutions we proposed in that engineering category.
So that was one, what is a curb bump out?
Yeah, so a curb bump out is an option where at the intersection, we have them in some of our downtown locations, where at the curb, there's a bump out to make the pedestrian crossings shorter. So sometimes when you have curbside parking parallel on a street, you bump out the curb, it gives the space for the car because there's nobody coming in that space. And at the intersection, it ensures that the crossing distance for the pedestrian is shorter. I'll show you a picture of the plan when we get there, when we're done. Okay. The reason this is important to use data to kind of inform the locations that we're going to attack projects and look at safety improvements is because in all of our communities, a small percentage of our roadways are responsible for a large percentage of the crash locations. Often this correlates with speed and volume in terms of where there's high-speed arterials, but it can also be key downtown streets or intersections, maybe where there's complex traffic patterns. So, for example, in Lawrence, on the right-hand side for Lawrence, Eudora, and Baldwin, this is the percentage of roadways in the white area with the yellow circles, where the small blue represents the percentage of roadways that represent how many crashes. So for example, 6.5% of the roadways in Lawrence equal 65% of the crashes. Likewise, you can see on the left side where 1% of the roadways in each of those communities represent anywhere from 30 to 75% of the locations of where bike ped crashes are occurring. And so being able to target those roadways systemically gives us the opportunity to make a big impact in crash reduction when we get to projects for improvements. And so each city now will look through what that looks like in terms of the map. But for each city within the plan, we established what is called the high injury network. We're showing you the high injury network for all modes, but also in the plan exists the high injury network specific to vulnerable road users. So bicycle pedestrians, persons using mobility devices and such. So you can see there's a bunch of different key corridors, some of which may be based on your driving experience in our communities. These will correlate to your personal experiences, and maybe some that won't, that don't, but for whatever reason show up in the data in this space. And so there's also in the plan a look at, particularly for Lawrence, where there's a predominance of more crash volume than in Baldwin City and Eudora. There's also additional work on some other key corridors, high-risk intersections, and high-risk corridors. And so the plan kind of describes all of those things in greater detail. We'll look at the Eudora network and also then the Baldwin City network. But there's just a lot less quantity of crashes in these spaces. So we then also, as part of this process, are finalizing, we don't have it live yet, but our Vision Zero crash dashboard, which will be public approach at transparency to show for the whole county where crashes are happening over a 5-year period, that people can go and find information out about the crashes that are happening in our communities. And then also we're working on developing the projects list that shows which projects had attributes attributed to safety improvements, so we can start to tell the story about before and after in terms of the impacts of some of our projects, the roadway projects that our communities or project sponsors are doing, some of which you see in through other documents and such. And the final part of the plan, we have a commitment to zero or a commitment to continuing zero for the communities that don't have fatality crashes on the record. And there's a number of strategies across the short term, looking at quick builds or policy development or supplemental planning, to additional longer term design and engagement work in some of those spaces that will. Admittedly, though, this is going to require funding commitments, particularly additional attempts at safe streets and roads for all and federal resources to help us accomplish across these timelines. But we're looking at that commitment to zero by 2050 that aligns with our Transportation 2050 and our out year of that plan. I'll give some examples of what projects look like in those spaces. For Lawrence, it's things like removing the west bound right turning movement at 23rd and Massachusetts Street, which is being coordinated as part of the Mass Street multimodal project. There's additional projects looking at this year's Safe Streets and Roads for All grant application that the City of Lawrence is submitting to deploy leading pedestrian interval at safe routes to school crossing at arterial intersections and in downtown. So exploring where when a pedestrian pushes the push button, they get a time before the green turns to get out into the intersection further, and that's shown to reduce crashes. There's locations for recommended pedestrian hybrid beacons, additional study for raised medians, access management, lighting, and policy work around the need to update things like the Complete Streets checklist and develop a quick build projects policy.
Another question.
Yes.
So they're at Mass and 23rd.
Yes.
So can you just snap your fingers and that happens, or does?
Well, fortunately, in parallel to this plan, the Mass Street Improvement Project was already embarking on a more holistic study of that corridor from 14th to 23rd Street. And they had also identified the crash history at that location as problematic. And so it's recommended in this plan, but we also knew that they were recommending a removal of that based on the study they were doing in that space because of the crash history.
But can it just, the sign goes up?
No. It's new concrete, new curb radii. It's part of the larger multi-million-dollar Mass Street Improvement Project. But you'll learn a little bit about that in the TERP conversation we're going to have next. There's some federal money tied in that project, and that project is in design right now.
Okay.
So you can see some of these projects may already be things that are on the radar. Some of these projects yet are not on the radar. And so in the City of Lawrence, as part of when we talk about leading pedestrian intervals, they're also going to do, they're applying for Safe Streets and Roads for All to do some additional work in the corridors of 6th Street and 23rd Street, where, the safety plan is looking at a very big picture, whole level. So it's looking at the systems approach. But if you get down into making recommendations in the corridors, we need to engage property owners a little bit differently before we would do a larger capital project around access or around lane changes or lane reductions or intersection improvements in those spaces. And so that approach to do supplemental planning provides the opportunity to seek some federal resources to do additional, more robust planning with additional specific stakeholder engagement, including property owners and residents in those spaces, to deploy solutions then that are more specific to those specific places. And so there's going to be, we're all the way from a very specific project where the recommendation is something, because we have parallel efforts going, to where there aren't necessarily parallel efforts going, and there's going to need to be development through concept and design, preliminary design to engage more people in those processes to achieve or to figure out what specific solutions are going to work to achieve those safety improvements.
Because I like the words in here that said it be not a quick fix, a quick
Bill,
build, yes.
yes.
But
It's
that
harder to
isn't-
do, it's harder to do quick builds on arterial streets. So a lot of the times, and I think you'll see that in a lot of the times there, I would say a good example maybe of a quick build that Lawrence is doing in this space is, pairing, I was gonna say Ninth Street, where the Ninth Street watershed project was happening. And as a result, they're gonna have to replace some pavement on that project. And the approach, looking through the complete streets checklist, made the realization that we could go back in and finish the lane reconversion from where we've done already the 3-lane sections further up to the west on Ninth Street. We could continue that into downtown and provide the opportunity in a more interim way, the curb or armadillo and stick buffered bike lanes further into the corridor. And so those are some of the more quick build stuff. I think one of the recommendations is about having a quick build projects policy, because the city doesn't currently have that. And there isn't necessarily, I think the problem that is ran into oftentimes is where does the funding come from for some of those quick build projects? Because there's plans for the bike ped improvements, there's plans for street maintenance, there's plans for, for ADA transition, there's plans for capital projects, but the quick builds may be in other locations. And so probably some more examples of quick build would be like what the city's doing with neighborhood traffic management. In the neighborhood traffic management program, work with the deployment of some of the speed cushions for testing.
Is that a
And then,
speed bump? Is that,
well,
Speed cushions have the holes for the wheels.
that was another.
they're defined a little differently, yeah. So I think there is room in that space, I think, for us to figure out what that looks like. And that's one of the recommendations is a quick build policy for all of the communities to figure out how to do that. Because there are opportunities, I think, where some cities have taken some of this, there's like curb railing where instead of pouring a concrete curb, you can buy metal curbing and you can put it up and you could make the pedestrian bump outs at the corners that we were talking about earlier, where it slows traffic to a smaller spot at an intersection, which can reduce conflicts because people perceive that to be smaller. They're slowing down. The people are more visible in those spaces. And there's opportunities like that none of the cities in our region have used in a quick build fashion.
So the thing there at the end of the dam, when I go home, shows you your speed, and I saw that cost $3,500 to $5,000 for each one of those. But does that take a long time to get it where you can have one of those put up?
I don't know that it takes a long, I mean, I think those could be smaller, quick build projects. The issue still is just identifying the funding. And there's maybe ongoing costs also for some of those things, depending on if you have one that transports data or not. You're now paying a data management fee. If you just have the sign, is it being solar charged? There's other stuff in that. So I think more holistically, there has to be an approach that's thinking strategically about all those things and deciding where they're maybe most effective. Because you may not know also, there's temporary signs that we have that as part of neighborhood traffic management, the city of Lawrence uses some speed feedback signs where we can either turn the speed on or leave it off, that they use as part of their neighborhood traffic management program. But because it's in neighborhoods, it's probably not in streets you're driving down, if you're just going through town to be out in the county, right?
Yeah.
But there may be other people who reside in Lawrence and in their neighborhoods have recognized that the city is using those techniques in places as part of a larger program there to understand what's happening with driver behavior. And they do have some short-term impact on driver behavior. When you have them on for a while and you put them in a place, they do reduce speeds, but once you take them away, it doesn't take long. But they do modify driver behavior in the short term. Yeah. And there's, that's one of many strategies you can use. So for the implementation thing, then for Baldwin City and Eudora, there's safe routes to school project recommendations, speed reduction, crossing improvements, and then quick build and complete streets policy recommendations as well. So we are, the city of Lawrence has adopted by resolution this Vision Zero Transportation Safety Action Plan. And we're seeking MPO policy board adoption by resolution today that we've included on the agenda, resolution 2025-01. can tell you adopt a lot of resolutions. And then we will be taking this also to Eudora and Baldwin City for their commission and council consideration. So I'd be happy to entertain any other questions people have about our work on safety.
Okay, any additional questions for Jessica on this?
I thought this was great. All the work that went into it and identifying individual spots. There's a little island. I come down sometimes when I come down Louisiana, up by the high school. What are those pedestrian islands? Is that what those
So
are?
if they have a waiting spot for pedestrians in the center, they're pedestrian islands. Sometimes they can also just be bottlenecks where they're causing the traffic to have to come through a more congested point, which is a slowing technique. So if the island so they can just be an island in the middle that may not, if it has a crosswalk in it though, then it can be a pedestrian island. You're talking about the one that has the crosswalk. Or you're talking about the bike crossing. I don't know. There's a couple over there.
I speed through there, so.
Don't say that. You're on record.
Oh, I'm going at least 25 miles an hour.
I really appreciated the detail and I loved having the actual answers to all the questions that were asked and the numbers of people. And I thought that was a wonderful thing to include. I wish I'd had more time to spend reading it.
Sure. Well, I do think this is the starting point. So I think this will be, and we hope, the basis for a lot of work throughout the region and helping each city, right, identify projects and future plans. And that the network stuff, particularly in the data analysis, should be things that get incorporated into complete streets considerations, or there could be future opportunities for, if you're already out doing curb maintenance and building ADA ramps, like, can we build it 3 feet out further and get a bulb out? Or, there are opportunities to do that when we're already in working spaces. And so we hope this really lays the foundation to be not just we wrote it and here's the plan that sits on the shelf, but instead a tool that helps guide future work.
I don't quite understand how priorities get set among all the competing projects.
Yeah. It's a negotiation, I think, always internally at each kind of organization, each city, we see that happen in a different way. But I think in some places, there's very specific data-driven approaches to things. For example, the city of Lawrence, if it's in the operating budget, it gets set at a staff level through negotiation in that space. But if it's in the capital improvement program, then that gets set through a whole larger scoring process based on a policy, like the capital improvement scoring process. And so it's different everywhere, I think, in how those things are getting navigated. And sometimes they evolve, they change. The policy gets updated, or there's some new thing that needs to be considered. And there's always lots of conflicting priorities for the funding. So, thank you. Yes.
All right. If there are no additional questions, thank you for the presentation, Jessica. And I'm always glad when we have information to go ahead and tell the story. So this helps us tell the story behind a lot of our capital improvement projects of kind of why we're doing it, the vision zero aspect of it. Is there anybody in here I guess there's nobody came in for comment or anything like that? No comment online?
Correct. There does not appear to be anyone in person nor online who has raised their hand for public comment.
All right, I'll bring it back to us for a roll call vote. Well, actually, a motion for a roll call.
Yeah.
Who's going to go ahead and start us off with a motion?
How detailed does it have to be? Can I just say we adopt this plan as presented
And resolution.
and resolution
2025-01.
All right, is there a second?
Second, Lisa Larson.
All right, first and a second. Jessica, I'll let you take over the roll call.
Okay, Dorsey,
Aye.
Eldridge. Aye. Larson,
Yes.
Littlejohn,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Thomas.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
All right. Thank you guys for that. I'll move us on to item 2, Transportation Emissions Reduction Program. I did notice looking through there that, was it me or that is the KDOT link a little bit, is it broken?
Oh, it might be.
That first one, the TRS one?
Yes. Well-
I'm not familiar with the link because we
Oh.
don't have anything on our website.
Okay.
Well, the link I had was to the KDOT Transportation Emission Reduction Strategy, which apparently no longer is posted on your website.
It could be, we have a brand new website, which is good information for
Oh.
everybody, brand new website. So that
Uh.
could have possibly have changed since the last time we used it. So yeah, I will double check it, but it is on our website.
Okay.
Go to our website where it's hosted, you can find theirs. So in the second link, if you go to the Transportation Emission Reductions Program call for projects and then at the bottom of that page, there is a link to the actual plan, but we will fix that for the minutes. We are bringing to you today, though, the Transportation Emissions Reduction Program. This is the second call for projects that the Lawrence Douglas County MPO has put out in partnership with the Kansas Department of Transportation, working through the carbon reduction program to implement the Kansas Transportation Emissions Reduction Strategies. As part of that process, the state of Kansas receives approximately $12.5 million per year for federal fiscal years 2022 to 26. And of that, the Lawrence Douglas County estimate for 2026 was $223,500. That is the 2026 money has already been appropriated. The 2027 number is an estimate based on what we could maybe expect to be appropriated, but it has not yet been done so by Congress. So we put out this call for projects to be in a timely fashion so a project could be identified and meet the time constraints to get a project obligated in the TIP for project implementation. During this call for projects, which was a competitive call for projects for any project sponsors within Lawrence Douglas County, within our MPO area, we received 2 applications. Staff scored and reviewed those projects based on our scoring that was provided in our application and reviewed with the Technical Advisory Committee for award recommendation. We're looking to select a project to amend into the TIP for November before the November 2025 STIP amendment. And we're looking for projects that within the carbon reduction call for projects that support the region's metropolitan transportation plan, Transportation 2050, and that help implement KDOT's transportation emission reduction strategies. So we had, of those 2 projects, and after review based on the scoring, both on the higher scoring project and based on the reality of a feasibility to be able to expend the awarded funding, what the other project that we received did not have the complete set of funding. They asked for $1.3 million and you saw we only have $455,000 possible max. And so the recommendation of the Technical Advisory Committee was to award $455,827,000 of additional carbon reduction funding to Lawrence for the Mass Street 14th to 23rd Street multimodal project. And so I say additional, they were the recipient of the previous call for projects. So they already have a federal project that has carbon reduction funding on it. But that was the recommendation from TAC. We've attached the applications and the scoring to the agenda also. We can look at those if anybody's interested, or I'd be happy to entertain any questions through this process that you might have.
How much money does the city have to furnish on this project?
The whole of the eligible costs to get the federal money, there needs to be a 20% match. However, you have to have enough money to fund the entire scope of your project. So the Lawrence project, for example, if you look at their application, shows, I'm like trying to find their local match, $1.46 million for match to their larger project. But then they also have another $1.5 million in non-participating costs. So those are costs that they're going to have to pay for because they aren't eligible for the federal funds. So it depends on the project, but so oftentimes local governments have to pay more than the 20%, but you have to at least match the federal money by 20% also.
And this has to be for reduction in emissions, not anything else. Is that correct?
Correct. Eligible projects included, that they have a whole list of kind of eligible projects in our, if you want to look at our fact sheet, we can pull that up. But different types of eligible projects, they talked about energy efficient street lighting, infrastructure-based intelligent transportation systems, so like traffic signal coordination or signal things, bike ped, non-motorized facilities, traffic monitoring, management and control of public transit projects. There can be a lot of different projects that have a proven emission
I
reduction.
was just going to say, if it were safety, the Eudora project would clearly be the better project.
Both of the project corridors actually are on high injury networks. Both of them are. And so I think for both communities, they have high safety benefit also.
Yeah, especially for pedestrians in Eudora.
Are you talking there at the bridge?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're looking for signalization. That was the other project funding.
But
Yeah.
also KDOT said that didn't qualify as high injury or whatever the crash.
No, I understand this is under emission reduction. I'm just saying if it was under safety, that would clearly be the better project, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think, there's the city of Eudora is seeking additional funding and consultation with KDOT to try to figure out how their project feasibility can feasibly be done, because they have a total project cost of almost 1.7 million, and that's not, and then there's another 330,000 that are on non-participating costs. So it's a close to $2 million project.
The other question I had is for the commissioners sitting up there on the screen, and that is with your budget issues, are you confident you will have the money to furnish your share of this project?
We can answer that in terms of.
Yes, the director, Linda Order, Assistant Director, Municipal Services and Operations. I did our construction management engineering group. And we already have the budget set aside for the Mass Street project. It had started last year. And so it's moved into design now.
Okay.
So it's moving forward with that.
Yes, thank you for that. It probably will be part of our CIP process that we'll be discussing next Tuesday. Hey, what's up?
You didn't see her when she walked in because she's on a camera view, because it's an automatically adjusting camera.
This disembodied voice. Okay.
Yeah.
I was about to say that, Charlie. Disembodied voice in the room. I was just, I'm just lucky it wasn't Morgan Freeman telling me something from the great beyond.
I don't have that great of a voice.
Any further questions on this one?
What utilities? Didn't I see there was utilities had to be moved?
For
from
the Mass
14?
Street
Yeah.
project.
Did I not see that?
I'm not
There's
aware of
not
much detail.
any that come to mind. I know we're looking at the signal there at 19th. So there's some below grade infrastructure. There might be some minor,
Okay.
adjustments, but we're not doing like a wholesale water line replacement or anything along that corridor.
All right.
That'll be done by September, is it?
No.
It's not one of those quick, it's not a quick bill. It's not a quick bill.
House concrete.
Any additional questions? All right, not seeing any. I assume no public comment there online.
There's no one in person nor online who's indicated they would like to provide public comment.
All right, just thought I'd check. I'd bring it back to us. Any further comment on that? If not,
Well, I will give you a further comment. From a safety standpoint, I still think the Eudora project would be preferable, but since they don't have the additional funds, and this is not a safety project, but a emission reduction project, I guess I will have to vote for it. Both projects are in my district, by the way.
Who would have known? All right, well, sounds good. I'd entertain a motion then.
I'll make one, Mayor. I move to approve the Lawrence Mass Street Multimodal Transportation Emissions Reduction Project Award for 2026-2027 funding in the amount of $455,827.
Thank you, Commissioner Larson. Is there a second out there? All right, thank you, Charlie. Second, and all right, I'll let Jessica go ahead with the roll call.
Dorsey,
Aye.
Eldridge,
Aye.
Larson,
Aye.
Littlejohn,
Aye.
Smith,
Aye.
Thomas.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
All right. Thank you all, and it was good to learn about that. I'll go ahead and take us on to our next item. Quick updates. Lawrence Bikes Plan update.
Thank you. We're just getting ready next week to host our second steering committee meeting. We posted the agenda, and also at the link, you can find the public comment summary from the results of our first public survey and round of engagement. So we wanted to keep you up to date on the work that body that you appointed to help guide us in the process is doing. So that's available online for your review.
All right. Any comment on that or questions? All right, not seeing any. I'll move us on to the other business. Received the
Yes.
U S Department of Transportation correspondence.
Yes, we have posted for your receipt correspondence we received in April from the U S Department of Transportation. And we are working with legal and our state and federal partners to understand how this impacts our compliance.
All right, we're just receiving that just to go ahead and view
Yes.
it, correct? All right.
Yes, thank you.
All right. That's the case. I'd move us on to item G, next meeting. Anything
We'll
else?
plan to see you in July. Nope,
All right.
What would be the date of the next meeting?
July 17th.
All right. And if that's the case, and anybody has nothing else, I'll go ahead and say we're adjourned. I don't think I need a motion for that, right, Jessica?
Nope, have concluded our business. Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Thank you,
Everybody have a great
everyone.
day.